Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Endurance Unleashed the Playbook Live. I am your host, Dr. Rob Berghorn. Thank you for joining me today on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and down here on TikTok. If you guys have any specific questions that you would love to have answered while I'm on this live, please feel free to chime in. We do have a few things that we want to talk about tonight. We are going to be talking tonight all about the marathon, getting ready for it, what it means to start your first one, what you're going to need to do in order to stay healthy and also injury-free while you're going after your PR for additional ones, and also trying to figure out what you can do in order to feel your best while crossing that finish line. So thank you for anybody who is joining us tonight. Again, if you have any questions, concerns, comments, please feel free to put them down below and I will answer them live for you. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Rob Berghorn. I am the owner and physical therapist over at Endurance Unleashed. We are a physical practice that's based out of Chapel Hill and Raleigh, North Carolina. We do have virtual clients as well in New York, so please feel free again to chime in. Thank you guys. Everybody's starting to roll in on TikTok. Thank you guys for joining me. Say hi. Ask any questions that you have about running, endurance, performance, and also marathon training. That is our main topic for tonight. For those of you who are unfamiliar with what we do today on these live streams that we do each week, we're going to be going through a little bit of the news. We're going to be going through a little bit of a main topic, which I did say tonight is going to be more about marathon training. And then we're going to do some live Q&A, both from people that we've had pre-prepared questions that have been sent to us from our community, and then also for people who are sitting here live in the stream and want their questions answered. So let's get into it. So as far as the news that's going on between the health and wellness world that we have going on, we had a new company come out and link up with some of the world cycling teams. There is an AI company called Vecta, and Vecta has made a partnership with the pro teams of Arkea, B&B Hotels, Green Edge Cycling, and FDJ Suez in different capacities. But they want to harness AI and industry-leading technology to equip the coaches with unrivaled data and insights. Basically, what Vecta has done is that they've created a suite of custom internal applications to enhance team operations performance, including rider performance comparison tools, race analysis and predictive models, AI-driven race and power output predictions, and ongoing research into the dynamics of athletes, specifically in this case in women's performance. So for those of you who are in the cycling world, AI is coming to you. AI, is, of course, in the recent years has been something that has been blowing up, and it is getting more and more involved. Because AI technology is now involved in sports, it is going to advance not only sports, but it's going to advance the health that goes into maintaining our athletes and improving their performance faster than we would have in other ways and technologies that we had in the past. So stay tuned to that. That is definitely something to keep your eye on, especially for the cycling world, since the season is only getting up and running now. Speaking of another thing that popped up as far as yesterday, from Science Daily Sports, they did come out with research from a research team over in Finland, where they discovered that there are specific protein level mechanisms in our body and our muscles specifically that allow for muscle memory when we're doing our training. So whether you're an athlete of any specific sport, or you're a bodybuilder, weightlifter, whatever it is, your proteins can memorize when you've actually done training and when you've not done training. So basically what they did with this study is they did 10 weeks of resistance training with these athletes, and that was followed by a break of 10 weeks also, and then they followed up with another 10 weeks of resistance training, and basically they used what they call the proteomics method, and basically what they found is it was possible to simultaneously analyze 3,000 different muscle proteins, and also look at the spectrometry, or basically the different metrics that go into protein build and also protein specifics that are in our muscles and whatnot. And basically proteomics is the study of the entire complement of proteins that exist or can be expressed by a cell, tissue, or organism. Basically, the study found that there was two types of changes in the protein profiles. of these athletes that participated in the study. Basically, they said that some of the proteins, as a result of training, returned to pre-training state. So basically, they did their 10 weeks of training, they took a rest, and then they went and did 10 more weeks of training to see like what happened to our body, what happened to our system. And basically, what they found is that some of the proteins in our muscles in our body responded and did the same changes that they did during the initial changes from the initial 10 weeks. And basically what that means is that some of our proteins in our muscles in general have muscle memory. They have the ability to reactivate. They have the appropriate ability for us to change based off of what we're changing with our activity in our body. They also said that another group of proteins changed as a result of training and remained changed during that break. So they took 10 weeks of training, 10 weeks of break, and those proteins remained the same while they were resting for those 10 weeks, and then they remained the same again when they resumed that training. So basically, if you take a break from your training because of either life that happens, you have something that pops up in the family, medical emergency, whatever it is, if you take a break, you're not going to lose everything. So those of you out there who do freak out a lot when you miss a day of training in the gym, you don't necessarily have to worry about it too much, especially if you've been training for a very long time. We do have the ability to make it, and basically what they've also been able to tell from the study is that they were able to show that those who are trained in the past and then took a longer break of up to 2 months, they were able to resume training at almost the same intensity by being able to remain the same level of proteins based off of either their diet or their amount of activity during the day from doing this specific study. So interesting stuff coming out. This is definitely something that we want to continue to follow, especially as more research gets done in this capacity to help us with training, so we don't always have to focus on training hard every day. Obviously, consistency and specific approach to resistance training or any kind of training in general is important and vital to improvement in your sport, but at the same time, focusing on not always focusing on I have to do my workout, I have to do my workout. If you miss a day, you're not going to lose too much based off of studies like this. So that's great. In regards to the endurance sports world now, we do have some great news coming out, especially from the Paris Marathon that happened a few days ago, April 13th specifically. It was the world's largest marathon ever completed, with over 50,000 people towing that starting line in Paris. Technically, there was about 56,950, which is 1,000 more than the London Marathon this past year in 2024. It is second place to the New York City Marathon with over 56,000 that have competed. Hold on, what did I write here? Technically over 56,950, which is 1,000 more than London Marathon had a thought that will be competing this year. London Marathon is coming up on the 26th, with Boston Marathon coming up on the 21st. London Marathon was expected to be the largest marathon, so stay tuned for that. It still may be the largest marathon coming up, but we have to see what the statistics come out when we have that happen this coming week. In regards to the number of people actually completed, 51% of the Paris Marathon were first-time racers. So running in general, I would say, and also marathon running or long course racing has been improving as far as getting more popular. 33% of those that completed it were also international, and 31% of the racers on the Paris Marathon were women. So not only is the marathon training, marathon completion, marathon or long course racing improving in general, but also both the balance between male and female racing is improving, which is great to see overall. And basically, it is not necessarily the marathon that had the most finishers, though. Basically, the one that did have the most finishers was last year's 50th anniversary of the Berlin Marathon, which happened in September, which had over 54,000 runners who completed it. And those who did run, who did race, who did win the race, Betadu Herpa from Ethiopia won that for the women's side, and it's her second marathon win of the year so far, with her previous win in Dubai. And also Bernard Biwott from Kenya took first place in the Paris Marathon for the men with a new personal best of 2:05:25, improving from last year's winning time by 8 seconds. So that's all great. Again, I did mention Boston Marathon's coming up this weekend, this coming Monday on the 21st, and then we also have London Marathon popping in on the 26th. Both exciting races, both very big televised. You know, besides the marathon itself, you know, Paris Marathon is not one of those big Abbott world races, but it is producing the same number of runners, the same number of racers. So this is hopefully maybe them getting, maybe in the future, getting onto the world stage as far as one of the Abbott races. I know Australia's still in the running, or has already been approved to be put into the Abbott World races, so that you can get your nice big shiny medal when you complete all 6, and once Australia's added 7. But you know, Paris is on the same level as any of the rest of the races that exist in the world. So great for the Paris Marathon. Let's get on to a few things that we have specifically going on. For those of you who are dealing with any back pain out there, for those of you who have worried about back pain ever coming across in your life, back pain affects about 80% of the population at some point in their life, regardless of where you live in the world. So if you are dealing with some back pain, nobody knows somebody who's dealing with some back pain, or is afraid that they're ever going to get back pain, please feel free to sign up for our webinar that we have coming up on this Saturday, April 19th. We're doing it at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to have a very interactive webinar, live stream, not necessarily live stream, but we're going to be live streaming it on Zoom. So if you sign up, if you want to and are interested, please head over to any of our social media, click the link to sign up, or feel free to reach out to us at info@endurance-unleashed.com, and we'd be happy to help you get set up and declare a seat, so that you are able to not only learn about back pain, understand where back pain is coming from, but also to answer any of your questions that you have specifically about your back pain treatment, and how you can live a healthier life without back pain. We did have a workshop this past week as well about knee pain. So we had a good number of runners and also a good number of people in the community who did reach out to us about knee pain and issues that they were dealing with their knee pain, and we were able to help a few of those even coming in this week. So if you want to work with us, if you do want us to do a workshop with you, your team, your company, and want to specifically talk a specific body area, a specific pain point, a specific injury that continues to pop up, please feel free, like I said, comment down below that you want to reach out to us and speak with us. Or if you want to set up a webinar or workshop with us, email us at info@endurance-unleashed.com. We'd be happy to set that up with you and figure out how we can keep you, your staff, or your athletes healthy. So we're going to be talking about our main topic tonight, and that main topic is marathon training. So obviously we're getting closer and closer to more and more marathons popping up this year. It is a big topic when we're just getting started, and there's a lot of people that want to do it, have done it. A lot of people that are just doing this brand new, going for big lofty goals, as far as like, instead of just starting to run, they're just saying, I'm just going to run a marathon. It can't be that hard, right? But it is challenging. There are a lot of things that go into it, and there's a lot of things that pop up that you may not necessarily see. So if you are someone who is doing their first marathon, you're sitting in the right live stream in the right place right now. So as far as the marathon goes, you know, there's a lot of training plans out there. There are a lot of cookie cutter kind of stuff. Obviously, they focus on improving little by little, and they focus on just the running itself, but it goes more into it than just the running. That is the basics that most training plans will go into, and unfortunately, it doesn't include a lot of things, leaving a lot of runners lost and potentially dealing with some injury and pain as a result. As a physical therapist who works with endurance athletes all the time, this is something that I see pop in all the time for me. I do see a lot of people who have injuries as they're training for it. Specifically last year, I had somebody strain his calf 8 weeks before the New York City Marathon. I've worked with somebody else who's training this year for marathon, and she wanted me to help her knee pain before she started training, so we got into that. I've helped people who are trying to get through their first one, and they're dealing with shin splints, they're dealing with knee pain, they're dealing with hip pain, they're dealing with low back pain. So basically, as far as training plans goes, you want something that is more specific for you if possible. Obviously, coaches can be expensive, but you do want to make sure that if you want this to be done right, you do want to make sure that we are doing us a good service, and we are making sure that we are taking care of ourselves. So we not only have stay healthy, but we also have better performance overall to continue with our ability to do our best and feel like we are being very smart about our training. So in regards to the marathon training itself, obviously the running is important. Obviously, we do want to make sure that we are training and we are gradually building over time. We do want to focus first on developing capacity. So developing capacity means your ability to go from X to Y or X to Z. We want to make sure that we're able to do that first. We want to make sure that we are able to function and be able to run without any issues, without any pain. We want to make sure that we're able to finish that without feeling like we're completely winded. Obviously, as we continue to build, we want to build based off of how we feel, but gradually over the weeks, we want to build volume first before we build intensity. And we don't want to build a volume and intensity at the same time, obviously. So we want to make sure that we're intentional with our training. We want to make sure that our training is very specific. So if for a weekly plan, we want to have at least a long run, at least a long run, at least an easy run, and at least a speedier, faster, or harder, more difficult run. That can be broken up as much as you want. That's the minimum, I would say. As far as marathon training, the more reps, the more volume you can get in. Obviously, as long as you're functioning well and pain-free, it's fine. As long as your body's able to tolerate it. Once we start having our body rebel, we may have to alter our plan slightly, but as long as we're getting 3 days a week of training, we're okay. As far as the training after that goes, if we're adding 5 days, if we're adding a 6th day in our training plan, that's completely okay, but we do want to make sure that everything is very specific. So we're having 2 easy days, we're having at least 1 hard day, we're having at least 1 long day, and we can throw either another longer day, not necessarily the longest day as far as your run goes, but we can also throw another long day, or we can throw another speed day in. It just depends on what we're trying to achieve for that day. For those of you who are joining in right now, please feel free to comment any questions below. We are talking a little bit more about running and training today, specifically for marathons, since more of them are coming up. If you have any pain-related specific questions, please feel free to also leave them down below. I am a physical therapist and business owner in Raleigh, North Carolina, that will be able to help with any of those questions for you should you have them. So if we're talking specifically about the training at this point, we want to have those specific days, those specific intentions. We don't always want to be running very slow. We don't always want to be running zone 2. For those of you who know what zone 2 is, we're not going to go into too much specifics. If we're going at a conversational pace, if you're able to talk and run at the same time, we don't always want to be at that pace. We want to change up our paces. We want to change up our distances. We want to focus on achieving something that run so that we have some improvement as we continue to go throughout our training plan. Obviously, we want enough rest built into that training plan as well. We want to have at least 1 full complete rest day in our training plan, and obviously we want to have some flexibility. Obviously, if we take a running plan or a training plan for a marathon off of Training Peaks or any other free coaching apps or any of the other coaches out there that offer some free training plans, we don't want to necessarily stick to that and only that training plan. We want some flexibility in there so that if we have life come up, because that just happens to do this thing periodically, and if we also have if we not feeling great that day, if we're feeling a little bit more achy, we're feeling a little bit more sore from the training plan that we did the other day, We want to make sure that we have some flexibility to either downgrade how much mileage we're doing or downgrading the intensity that we're doing, or we're putting in an extra rest day. By putting in that extra rest day, that may be saving you the rest of the week of having good training. So just like I mentioned with that study, you're okay to take an extra rest day if your body's not feeling it for the day. You're not going to lose major gains. You're not going to lose a lot of training or not a lot of what you've been working on for the past weeks, months, whatever. But you do want to make sure that you're staying healthy, you're staying efficient with your training. So this leads me into the point of why marathon training isn't just about the running. After we build capacity, we're wanting to build more of that volume. We want to build more of that more speed. We want to start approaching race pace, kind of, or intended goal-rated race pace. In regard to the rest of it, we need to focus on 4 different things. We need to focus on our hydration. We need to focus on our sleep. We need to focus on our nutrition. And we need to focus on our stress. All those things are ignored a lot in training, in specific training plans. I focus on that with all of my athletes. I try to make sure that each of them try to have as much of that in check as possible. So hydration, you're drinking at least water throughout the day. If you're someone who sweats a lot, especially in the hotter months, especially in the more humid months, we're consuming at least one electrolyte-related drink, and we're not talking about Gatorade unless you're training for over an hour that day. We're not talking specifically about that. We're talking about something with an electrolyte mix. I prefer LMNT, which is an electrolyte powder that you can put in. Something else I also like to use is Nuun. It's an effervescent tablet. You just drop it in your water and you go. I will say LMNT has a little bit more calories than Nuun, but at the same time, it's not a huge amount. It's not a big drop in the bucket. If you're training appropriately, you don't have to worry about gaining any weight from adding extra calories in that water. But you do want to make sure that you're hydrated. You want to make sure that you're not getting cramps. You want to make sure that you're feeling good and recovering appropriately by flushing your system out from irritating chemicals that are from our workout, and also any pain-generating signals that could be related to our training as well. So we want that in check, obviously. We want our nutrition. We want to make sure we're consuming enough protein throughout our day. We want to make sure we're consuming enough carbs throughout our day. The problem with runners, endurance athletes in general, they tend to consume a lot of carbs, and sometimes it's too much carbs and they don't get enough protein. Proteins are very vital. Proteins in general help us recover. If we're talking about any of the fad stuff, and I think I talked about this in one of my previous live streams, if we're someone who consumes or likes to go for the compression boots, the cryotherapy, the cryo chambers, the hyperbaric chambers, the saunas, the cold plunges, whatever it is, if you like doing that, it's fine, but you're not going to get as good results if you have your sleep, your nutrition, your hydration, and your stress in check. If you do all the fad stuff, all the modality stuff that we just talked about, and we don't have any of the others in check, we still may be feeling like we're training like crap. So make sure that if we're doing, we talked about the hydration, so we're going to talk about nutrition a little bit more. So we talked about getting enough proteins, enough carbs. Everything else for the rest of our day, calorie-wise, can be consumed as fats. We need fats as well. Fats are something that we need in order to help with our brain, help with some of the recovery of our tissues, but we want to try and consume unsaturated fats. If anything, try it from more natural products, not necessarily from processed oils, and focus on consuming it from more natural sources like vegetables and beans and legumes and whatnot. As far as the proteins go, we want to consume at least 1 to 1.5 grams per kilogram body weight that we have, just to make sure that we're getting as much as we need. As far as the carbs go, we want to get anywhere between 60 to 90 grams per hour, especially if we're training, and we're trying to consume that just so we can maintain. So if you're someone who's doing long course running like we're talking about tonight, for every hour you want to be consuming at least 60 to 90, and that's going to be dependent on your weight and also your sweat rate and how much you're expending per calorie or per unit of power that you're putting out. So this is something you can get assessed. This is something you can look online. I think Infinite Nutrition has something that you can look up and see what you need as you're trying to consume and perform. We do want to make sure that if we are training, especially as we get into the longer training bouts, that we're practicing everything that we assume that we're going to be doing on race day. This is something that's not discussed enough. This is something that people find out the hard way a lot on race day, whether it's their first race ever by doing a marathon or if they've done multiple races throughout the year and this is their next race. This is something that pops up a lot in my questions and also in people that I see. But understanding what you're going to do stretching wise, what your pre-race meals are going to be, what your meals are going to be the day before, the 2 days before, as long as you're practicing all of this and you don't change up everything, race day is going to be great. We want to make sure that we're also practicing with every single bit of nutrition that we're going to be using during race day as well. We want to make sure everything is good for our digestion. It's not upsetting our stomach. It's not causing any irritating issues to our bowels. We also want to make sure that we feel like we have enough energy, like I was talking about with the carbs. We want to make sure that we're consuming enough so that we don't feel like we're bonking. We're not cramping. We're not getting side stitches in our abdomen. We want to make sure that we are all hunky-dory so that we don't have any issues as races come up. As far as continuing to train and continuing to run, we do want to make sure that we're practicing our warm-up regularly. We also want to focus on what our post-run recovery would be. This is all important. This is all helpful in the sense that if we're practicing some of the fad stuff that we were talking about by doing the compression boots, by doing the compression boots, compression boots, the cryo chambers, cold plunges, whatever you like to do, as long as you like that and you're feeling like it's beneficial to your recovery, good. But we also want to practice good sleeping habits. Try and stay consistent with your sleeping habits. Try and stay consistent with your hydration. Try and stay consistent with your nutrition overall. And we also want to help minimize stress. That's one thing we didn't talk about yet. Stress obviously comes in many different forms, and it's also positive and negative. Obviously, some of it we have more control over it than others. Obviously, if life and family situations don't necessarily allow for stress alleviation, we still want to alleviate as much stress as possible. So if you're someone who has a stressful job, trying to do as much as you can to separate from that every day by doing something to relax at night before you go to sleep, making sure you're giving yourself at least an hour before you go to sleep to wind down from technology and screens, avoid blue light, trying to focus on understanding what those stresses are. Try to do something activity like low-level activity-wise that can help you wind down. So for me, I know it's reading or it's painting. So feel free to try something, a little bit of hobby, a little bit of crafting, whatever it is that you know helps you relax other than being on a screen or other than thinking about work or doing something related to work at least an hour before you go to sleep. Do that just so you can reduce your stress. Obviously, if you need to physically or mentally remove yourself from the different stressful situations that you may not have 100% control of, try to do that as best you can, whether that's a family member that you need to kind of separate from, and yes, you can do that. You're allowed to do that. Nobody's telling me that you have to keep that family member in your life. Same thing goes with friends. It is very hard to do, but it is something that can be very beneficial to life. But as far as that goes, we want to make sure that we're doing that. Last little bit I want to talk about for marathon training is strength training. Yes, it is important. Yes, it is something that we need to do, and not only for the lower body, but yes, for the upper body too. If our legs get tired, the thing that helps us finish or the thing that helps us keep us going is our arms. So as long as our arms, our core, and our hips are strong, then we are able to continue to push, we're continuing able to go through, and we're able to have better performance by working our whole body when we're doing our strength training. Strength training is to improve your performance, but it's also going to help you improve your overall function as far as your ability to be resilient and prevent injury. It's going to make training easier. It is going to make you less achy as you continue with your training, especially as you go further along and you work in and build more and more miles. It's also going to help you recover faster. It's also going to keep you from getting sick. If we're just talking about generalized benefits, it's going to help you from keep from getting sick. If you do get sick, it's going to help you get better. If we're talking about aspects of losing weight. We're going to lose fat mass faster only because the more muscle mass that we have, the more calories we burn just by existing. So strength training is going to be vital for you, whether you're marathon training or not. But if you are marathon training, you have to continue to be doing some level of strength training, and that's about 2 to 3 times a week. If you can fit it in, at least 2 times a week. If we need to maintain our strength and we're life and whatnot, we need to be doing it at least 1 time a week. Because 1 time a week will help us maintain something and have us do something rather than nothing, but we do need to have some level of strength training existing within our training plan. Whether this is your first one, you're just getting started, or if this is something you feel like you're stuck. This especially goes for people who feel like they're stuck and not improving. And if those of you who are strength training out there and are still dealing with issues of pain, discomfort, or continuing to deal with not improving or feeling stuck, this may be related to the fact that you're either not doing the right training, you're not working the right exercises, or not doing the right muscles, or you need to focus on some of the smaller stabilizers and less of the bigger movers, especially if we're dealing with some pain while we are still doing strength training and still having issues. So if you are dealing with that and you're confused, you're lost, please feel free to reach out to us. You can either reach out to us at endurance-unleashed.com, or you can email us at info@endurance-unleashed.com. You can comment down here if you're live on the stream and if you have questions about strength training or any pain-related kind of issues that you have. We've helped plenty of athletes, both who've never strength trained before or athletes who are have been in it and are struggling with improvement in their performance as a runner, to be able to overall improve their performance and function. So that's a little bit on the marathon training. I know we can get a little bit more into specifics. I know I can talk more about the nitty-gritty of you can improve this each week. But that is exhausting, and for me, exhausting in a sense for you guys to listen to me for that long. But at the same time, we do want to focus on the basics and then build from there. Obviously, when we're speaking about the individualized week-to-week training, we do want to make sure you can get away with a 12-week training plan for a marathon, but if we're doing either a 16, 24-week training plan, we are in multiple months of training. And this especially goes for my female athletes out there. If you're someone who, how do I want to phrase it? If you're someone who deals with menstrual cycles that are, if you want to put it in quotes, aggressive, because I know some women would describe it as that, or women who deal with periods that are very heavy or have like very significant symptoms, of reducing injury and also overall feeling and performance. Taking a lower recovery week, the week that we are about to have our menstrual cycle, or even just going from the couple days before and the first few days after your period starts. If we're dealing with any of those significant symptoms and you're feeling crummy, you're feeling not so great, it is okay to take a rest week. And you do want to build at least a few rest cycles within your training plan just so your body can recover. Because I've seen athletes who try to build their entire training program, and because they try to build their entire training program without taking small rest breaks in between, they ended up getting injured. They ended up getting very stiff and achy. They didn't feel like they were recovering very well. So making sure that we're building in a week of lower level training to help just, 1, keep things interesting, 2, to allow for better recovery, 3, so that when we go back into training, we'll feel fresh. So I mean, as far as like that goes, if we are slamming things in and doing a 12-week training program, I would say 2 cycles of that would be fine. So basically every month except for that one last month where we're going to be doing those last 2 weeks off or tapering down. We don't really need one for that. But the other 2 months that we're doing, we want at least 1 week where we're kind of doing some level of down training. That slammed kind of training program is something that I wouldn't necessarily recommend for anybody other than experienced marathon runners or somebody who's done at least a few half marathons before and is somewhat trained for a half marathon at that point. If we're doing more of the 16 or 24 week training program, we want at least 2 to 3 of those training cycles built in, where we have rest weeks built in for that, so that we are able to, like I said, recover and make sure that we're fresh for that next bit of climb in our, whether we're improving the volume or whether we're improving the intensity of our training. This goes for people who are just starting out or people who are very experienced. So if anybody has any questions, again, feel free to comment down below. I'm just checking TikTok right now to see if we have any questions for tonight. For anybody that's coming in, and right now I don't necessarily see anybody coming through yet for that. So TikTok is good. We don't necessarily have any questions. And if anybody has any questions on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube, please feel free to comment down below. I'd love to answer any of your questions that you may have and be able to figure out what best answers that you need for your things. As far as like questions that we had coming through our community over the past couple of days, we do have a few of those for tonight. We have about 6 so far. Again, if you guys have any questions, please feel free, leave them down below, and I'd be happy to get to those for you on the live stream while I'm still here. So our first question for tonight is from Lisa, and she says, I am just getting started with running, and I get shin splints every time I run for a longer, I'm going to assume longer period of time. If I want to avoid this issue with my goal to run a marathon, how do I go about this? It's a very good question, Lisa. It's something that is very common and something that a lot of people deal with. As far as the shin splints go, it's usually 2 different things. It usually can either be in the front of the shin or in the inside of the shin. And if it's on the front, it's caused by a different thing than it is from the inside. Generally, it will be from pounding on the ground. That is one cause of it. It can be due to how you're landing with your foot. So if your foot is landing in front of where your body is, instead of like landing either close to, underneath, or on a backward traveling foot, if we're not having any of that happen, that could be where some of your shin splints are coming from. At the same time, it could also be coming from lack of stability, lack of control in our hips by our calves, our lower leg muscles, working overtime in order to help stabilize, especially if we are someone who is flat-footed, especially if someone who doesn't have control over their foot. So if you are dealing with that as well, you don't have control of your feet, you don't have control of your hips, we could be dealing with excessive stress and strain of our shins because of that. It could be also related to your shoes. If we're not using the appropriate shoes for you, that could be a problem as well. So all that needs to kind of go into analysis when we go through this. There could be a number of reasons of why this goes on. How to prevent it, obviously, we talked about some of it. Some of it does go into us making sure that we're doing our strength training, like I mentioned, weekly, making sure that we're getting our running assessed. We can do that at least once a year. For someone who's running almost all year round, if you want to get it done at least twice a year, especially if you're looking to like fine tune and improve, going to somebody like me, either a physical therapist who works with runners or someone who works specifically with runners to work and analyze your run. This is not only just something where they just take a video of you and look at it, but they want to assess your strength, your range of motion, your flexibility, your mobility, your body mechanics as you walk and move. And also have you do some functional tests to see like where we're maybe lacking some of that strength and stability. So if you are dealing with those shin splints, they are pesky, they can be a problem, but you can get over them as long as we're addressing the right cause. We need to figure that out obviously first. Obviously, the longer we go into our run, the more endurant our muscles need to be, the stronger we need to be, and also we need the more appropriate our mechanics need to be, because the more steps that we take that are inappropriate by landing in front of us or not landing on a backward traveling foot, the more we can potentially have excessive stress and strain going through our system, leading to some of that pain. Same thing goes with the running shoes. If our shoes are not either cushioning enough for us, if we have high arch shoes, if we are someone who has flat feet and doesn't have control on our feet, the more steps that we take, and we put more strain by having abnormal mechanics, that all factors into. One other thing I will say about shoes, especially if you change your shoes to this specific type, or if we have running shoes that change the model for some reason, because every company decides to change up some of the build or design sometimes. If you ever look at your shoes and you look at the back of your shoe, and if this is the back of my shoe where my heel would sit in over here, and this is like the real back, and the bottom of the shoe exists here, down on the bottom. If you notice that the heel of your shoe extends back out from the back of that shoe, you can put excessive stress on the front of your shin, and that could be causing some of the strain on the shin as well, especially if you're a heel striker. Heel striking is not a problem. It's not a bad thing to have. But if you're someone who does have a shoe where the rubber or the foam sticks out a little bit further from the back of the shoe, we could be looking at, on top of potential mechanical stuff going on, but we could also be looking at pain and issues related to the stress and the strain. So if we go back to physics, and this is the center of the ankle, this is the end of my shoe, but the foam extends further back, you're putting a larger fulcrum or a larger acting force. And if this is the back of the shoe, this is the back of the foam, you're putting a larger amount of force on that ankle, which is putting more stress on the muscles in the front of the shin, giving you some of that shin splint. So I hope that helps answer. If you do have any more questions specifically about that, or you want to get a detailed answer, please feel free to reach out to us. You can email us at info@enduranceunleashed.com with a dash between endurance and unleashed, or give me a text at 516-387-4669. I'd love to get that ruled out for you and figure out what's best for you. Next question. So we have a question from Scott P. And Scott asks, I get groin pain when I run uphill or if I try to really do a lot of speed work. Where is this coming from? All right, Scott. So as far as like the groin pain, it could be from a number of things, just like with anything else. In this specific case, I'm going to assume it's the stability going on in your hip, and you might not have enough. And or your hip flexors may not be strong enough. I know for some people, they say their hip flexors are tight all the time. They try to stretch them. They have issues with them. Usually that's one of two things. Either it's compensating for a weak core or weak abdominals, and we're not getting enough stability through there, so our hip flexors are working overtime for our low back, or we are dealing with increased strain where there is weakness in our hip flexors, or we could be dealing with both. Those are very common things that I experience in my practice with people, and this is something that could be causing some of your pain, especially if it's happening in the groin. I obviously don't know if you have any hip dysplasia. That is obviously something that could be going on too, where we don't have enough bony stability around the joint. We have a very shallow joint, and because we have that shallow joint, the hip is moving around a lot in there. Because we don't have that bony stability that we would have in the hip, we do need extra muscular stability in that hip to make sure we're not causing excessive stress and strain on that hip. Anytime that you do get groin pain, it could be from a number of those kind of conditions. We could be also dealing with some level of impact related to some weakness that we have on the outside of the hip, whether that's our external rotators that exist in our butt, or we could be dealing with issues that exist with the lateral stability of our hip, the muscles that exist on the outside of our hip. If we're dealing with any of those kind of things and our pelvis is dropping as we're running, as we're moving, especially when we're running uphill, or our hip as we go to run, where our knee is kind of diving down and in. If we're having any of that kind of happen, it's going to close down the hip joint, because we have an open and a closed position of the hip, and basically the internal or the closed position of the hip is bending the hip up into flexion, so bringing your knee towards your chest and letting that hip dive down and in. So either if that's rotation in, or if that's the knee coming in towards the other knee. If any of those are happening at the same time, if we have any kind of restriction in that hip capsule as well, so if we don't have enough mobility, flexibility in that hip, that could be causing some of it as well, leading to some of the pressure on the hip joint itself. So that could be causing as well. So we need to figure out first if it's the mobility or flexibility, then we need to figure out if we have any strength or stability issues, and then also we need to work on any kind of hip flexor tightness or any kind of issues related to that as well. So I hope that helps. I know I don't necessarily narrow it down for you because this question isn't very specific, but at the same time, I hope it helps you, give you an idea of where to go next. If you haven't spoken with a physical therapist that works with runners or endurance athletes before, one right now, you're talking with one, but at the same time, find someone in your area, talk with them, figure out what this issue is, make sure that you really sit down, ask any questions that you have specifically around this, just so that you can get to the real bottom of what's specifically going on. So our next question that we have from tonight is, strength training is very foreign to me. I see a lot of videos on YouTube and want to do it right. Where is the best place to start? And this is from Karen Z. So Karen, I appreciate your question. This is very good. Strength training is very foreign to a lot of people. It is becoming more commonplace now that there's a lot of things being posted on social media, and it's a good thing to have, especially with a lot more research that we're seeing, both in the cancer world of having more muscle mass to help more with survivability. A couple of studies that came out recently to help with all-cause mortality by doing some level of strength training overall, and also with trying to make sure that we stay healthy, resilient, and not have any muscle or any kind of injuries, especially as we go later in life. So obviously YouTube, especially even if we look, like I just said, if we look on TikTok, we look on Instagram, we look on Facebook, there's a lot of people doing a lot of things, and not everybody is great. As far as getting started, we want to make sure that we are doing the main movers. I specifically for my practice love to make sure that my athletes are doing functional things. So going up and down stairs, making sure that squats, lunges, deadlifts, all those are very good to do. Whether we've had back pain or any kind of injury in the past, they're all good to do, but you have to do them right. You have to do them in the right capacity. That's why working with somebody, especially when you're going initially, is important. I know some people don't necessarily want to invest right away, especially if they're just getting started, but it may be the best investment that you have to avoid pain, injury, and having to pay for help afterwards if you do get hurt by doing some of it. Strength training in general is very healthy. It is very injury averse, especially when we start talking about sports. If we're talking about competitive weightlifting, it's much less injury prone than if we're talking about football or soccer. At the same time, we do want to get started simple. So we want to work, if we want to just do something very simple, we could just work on arm raises. Since you can see me here, we want to focus on all directions to make sure that we're doing covering all the bases around the shoulder. We want to make sure that if we're doing the hip, we want to make sure that we're strengthening the quads. We want to make sure that we're strengthening the abductors, the muscles on the outside of the hip. We want to make sure that we're strengthening the muscles behind the hip, the big gluteal muscles. That's why we start doing some of the deadlifts, the squats. We don't necessarily need to do weight first. We just want to make sure that form is appropriate first before we move forward with getting overall performance improved. So don't worry about weights. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing. Focus on form. Make sure that if you understand by watching at least some of these videos on YouTube, Instagram, especially the ones that are related to form and appropriate form, make sure you're focusing on that first before you start focusing on either what the gym bros are doing or what the if you want to put them quote unquote muscle mommies are doing in the gym. You want to make sure that you're focusing on yourself and what you're able to do first. Just like with running, you're running with yourself. You're trying to improve yourself one day at a time. So if you are someone who is trying to start with strength training, focus on form, focus on at least twice a day in the gym, like we mentioned earlier, and also focus on the main movers for now before we start focusing on getting to more of the stabilizers to a degree, and also focus on the easier lifts that you can do, but also having some level of cycle. I know there's a lot that goes into it, so if you do have any specific questions, especially if you're listening right now on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or TikTok down here, down by the base of my computer, please feel free to leave those questions, leave those comments down below so I can help you out with some of those questions, especially if you have more specific space off of that. We have 3 more questions left. If anybody has any more questions, please feel free to leave them down below so I can help answer them for you. So our next question is from Matt. He says, I'm preparing for a marathon coming up in the next couple weeks. How do I go about down training, and also how to adjust my training plan for the rest of the year if I have New York City coming up later in the year? So that's a good question. Something that pops up. Obviously, we talked about some of the training plans that exist out there that are basically main cookie cutter. They are either 12-week, 16-week. 12-week is usually very tight and compressed. 16-week or 24-week. As far as someone who is doing a marathon or doing a half marathon and then having a marathon later in the year, obviously you're doing some training already for that first one, and you're going to be trained already for that first one. So what you want to do is, like we talked about earlier in the live stream, is to down train a bit. Take a break, either a week or 2 weeks. Do whatever training you feel like doing, not necessarily regimented training. Just do something you feel like doing. Well, it could be cross training by going on the bike. It could be going on the elliptical. It could be doing the Stairmaster. Whatever you feel like doing that week, do that. Just so you can not only psychologically reset, but also you're still doing something without kind of going completely vegetative. You can do that for the first week if you're going to separate it out into a 2-week kind of span, but obviously sometimes people have a hard time getting back with the consistency of training after that. If you are someone who is doing 2 weeks of rest in between that first marathon, half marathon, and going into your training, we do want to make sure that we are going forward building in down training cycles still in there. We want to do at least 1 to 2 of those, especially if we have a marathon coming up in the next couple of weeks and we're starting main training back in June. We want to have at least 2 to 3 of those still built into our training plan, so that we not only can feel fresh, we stay fresh, we stave off injury to a degree, and also training doesn't get stale, especially since we're already very trained up for a marathon. This also, especially if you're doing a half marathon now, it will allow you to focus a little bit more on performance for this next one, clean up any issues that we had from this initial marathon or half marathon, and it will allow us to really tweak what our plan was so that we can make the second one even better. So I hope that helps answer your question. So the next one that I have is from Drew, and he says, do I need fancy shoes to be a great runner? And that is a pretty simple answer, and that is no. As far as like when I talk about with my athletes, when I work with them, being or any type of shoe that you're running in, you want it to be the one that's best for you. You don't want to go with the top name brand running shoe. You don't want to be with the brand that is the best for all athletes. Past few years has been Nike. Nike is falling off the top of that podium right now, or Nike, depending on what country you come from. Now it is starting to become Adidas or Adidas, depending on where you come from also. Brooks is also moving up in the world as far as like the sports or the super shoes. So keep an eye out on what's going on with that. But Adidas or Adidas is definitely starting to take the podium from some of the Nike or Nike runners out there who have been doing it for a while. But we do want to make sure that we have the shoe that's right for you. We want to make sure that our foot sits inside the parameters of the shoe and not feel like you're spilling over. You want to make sure you have at least a thumb's width of space between the front of your shoe and your big toe, especially if we're doing marathon training, if we're talking about specifically tonight, because our feet will swell. You do want to focus on shoes that you feel most comfortable in, that you feel most supportive in, that you don't get aches and pains with. As long as you have that, we're good. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to look nice. It just has to perform well for you. So I hope that helps answer your question, and we'll move on to the last question that we have so far for tonight. If anybody has any other questions, please feel free to leave them down below. Please ask questions just so that you can continue to get your answers, regardless of whether that's running related, marathon training related, pain related, or overall physical therapy related. I'd be happy to answer any of those questions for you. So last question that we have from our prior people tonight is from Jake, and he says, I have pain in my big toe when I run for really long distance as I am preparing for my first marathon. Where is this coming from, and what should I do about it? And that's a good question. And Jake, especially since you are a male, or I'm going to assume you're a male, there is, it could be, we got to look at causes first. So do you have gout in your family? If you have gout in your family, this could be one of the reasons, and therefore at this point, I would have you just get checked out just in case, especially if you have gout in your family, especially if you have it in multiple members of your family. Because you may not be able to process a certain type of enzyme in your body, creating those crystalline structures in your big toe, giving you some gouty arthritis. So we need to make sure we take care of that first. If we don't have any people in our family who have gout, then the next thing I would go to is your mobility of that big toe. Do you have mobility of that big toe? If you don't have mobility of that big toe, then we need to work on getting better mobility of that big toe. If we're not doing that, I would start looking at your mechanics. And if it's the mechanics of your foot and ankle, then I would focus on if you've had any previous ankle sprains, especially if it was a bad one and you were immobilized for a long period of time, either multiple weeks, or if you had a broken ankle and that was 6 weeks ago, I would see if that was, or 6 weeks you were in a cast or whatever, or a walking boot, I would focus on that as well. Because if we're dealing with any kind of restriction in that ankle and we're trying to gain some level of dorsiflexion or that bringing your toes up towards the sky kind of scenario, if you're missing any mobility in that big toe or you're missing any mobility in that ankle, what will happen is if this is my big toe, we will not be able to dorsiflex. We'll not be able to push off appropriately, or we'll not be able to go from heel strike and foot flat to mid stance, where we're kind of going into that dorsiflexion where our shin is moving forward on our ankle. And what will happen is instead of being able to push off appropriately, we'll turn our foot inward. And because we're turning our foot inward, what is going on here? TikTok is being funny. All right, TikTok. Well, I'm ending in 5 minutes anyway, so we'll keep going with this. Anyway, so as far as the rotation goes, so if we're not able to push off appropriately because we have mobility issues, we may be allowing that foot may be going in. We may be causing somewhat of a bunion formation. We may be putting excessive stress through that big toe joint, giving us some of that pain as well. So that would be my next big thing. If we're still getting pain, regardless of because we still have good mobility, because we still have both at the foot and the ankle, if we're still dealing with issues with that, I would say it'd be most likely your foot stability. And that would come in the form of not being able to contract the smaller muscles in your foot, not being able to grip the ground appropriately, and also struggling with the ability for you to stabilize side to side with that ankle. If we don't have any of that, basically when we go to push off, if we're not being able to drop down that big toe as we go to stabilize our arch and create that arch in our foot, if we're not able to do any of that, we go to push off, we're not going to have the ability we're going to put excessive stress through that toe, potentially giving you either sesamoiditis, which is two little bones that sit at the base of the big toe, or we could be dealing with some excessive pressure through the big toe itself, giving you some of that pain. So I hope that helps answer that question for you, Jake. Again, if you have any questions related to that, please feel free, as it's ticking across the bottom of my screen right now, info@endurance-unleashed.com. Feel free to email us and we'll continue to answer those questions for you, or reach out to us on any of our social media platforms, and we would be able to help you out with that to continue to get your answers in. Jesus. Thank you, TikTok, for finally fixing itself. So again, I don't necessarily see any more questions coming in for tonight. If everybody is all good, we could just end the live stream here. As far as what we're doing coming up in the next week, again, we are having our Jesus, brain fart. We're having our back pain workshop coming up this weekend, Saturday, April 19th, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you do want to sign up for that, comment low back pain down below, or feel free to reach out to us at info@endurance-unleashed.com. We'd be happy to save a seat for you, get you signed up. Whether you're dealing with athletic-related back pain, daily activity-related low back pain, we'd be happy to help you out regardless. But if you want to sit down, declare your seat for that, we have a couple of spots still left available. So if you want to attend this weekend, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to help any way we can. But otherwise, we're going to end for tonight. As far as for next week's topic for our live stream, we're going to be talking about how consistency will beat motivation in rehab and sports. So if you are interested in learning how consistency in training can help you overcome all, especially when motivation isn't there for you, please feel free to tune in next week. Otherwise, Dr. Rob signing off this week, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good night.